video today is going to be on multiplying and dividing decimals. So there's a couple different things that we're going to do with this one. It's a little different than the addition and subtraction one. So let's start off with some keys for multiplying. So when you multiply, one of the things that we did last time was we lined up our decimal. This time we're going to line up the last digits in our numbers. So you want to put the bigger number, the one that has the bigger whole numbers, on top, and then the smaller ones on the bottom. But the bottom line is you want to line up the last digits that you have. Once you've done that, you're going to just simply multiply, forget about the decimals. And then the second big step is that you're going to count the decimals behind the numbers, or count the numbers behind the decimal in the numbers in the top and bottom part of the problem. So as you look at that, that's kind of where these two big steps are. To set up your problem, and once you've multiplied, when you get your answer, you're just straight multiplying, and then look at the numbers behind the decimals. And we'll show you that in some of the examples. So if we look at these two steps that we have, what you're doing is you're setting up a problem. So our problem is 4.63 times 2.4 as it goes through. What you want to do is line up your decimal, or line up your last digits. So the problem's going to look something like this. So we're taking our numbers, we're taking the number that, and they both have the same amount of whole numbers in it. So either one is fine. You're going to line up your last digits. So basically the one that has the most digits is kind of one of the ones that you want to put on the top. Just makes it easier. So when we do that, we're going to line up our 4 and our 3. We don't care the lineup of our decimals. We're just going to line up our last digits. So we're going to make a nice straight line with our last digits. All right. For our next step, we're just going to simply multiply the number. And once you've multiplied it and come up with an answer, now we're going to just look at the numbers behind the decimal in the problem at the top and bottom. So forget the decimal at this point. We don't even know it's there. Just multiply it as you would a 3-digit times a 2-digit and come up with your answer down at the bottom. So when you do that, now you're going to take that last second step, and this is kind of the big chunk of it, is you're going to count the numbers behind the decimal. So here we have 2 numbers, here we have 1, which gives us a total of 3. So 1, 2, 3, that gives us our total. This part however you want to do it is fine with me. Some people put the little numbers there. Sometimes that gets confusing. That's up to you. So we're going to count the numbers behind the decimal and the top and bottom numbers. We did that. That gives us 3. We've done our multiplication. So when we do that, we're going to move the decimal in the answer to the left as you go to see what's going to happen in the problem. So for our answer, we're going to take our decimal, which is always at the end of a whole number, is going to be to the right, and we're going to move it to the left that many places. So we have to move it to the left 3 places, because that's how many we found. So we're going to move it 1, 2, and 3, and that's going to be our answer for that part. So if we look at a different problem and we set this thing up, again, we're going to set this up, but this time I put in some trailing and preceding zeros. So when you look at this, we have 39.00. Well, we really don't need the trailing points of this. What we need is, we need to know that the decimal is still at the end of the 9. And again, anytime that you're given a number, if I use 39, the decimal's not there, it's always located at the back. So 0.058 or 0.58, we don't need this preceding 0, so we can just put this here. Again, we're going to line up our last digits, and then we're going to start our division problem. So if we look at that part of the problem, and we see, well, here's our setup of what we're doing, 0.39, or excuse me, 39, and then times it times 0.58, and I apologize, I forgot my multiplication symbol there. Hang on a second, let me grab something. Sorry about that. So we have a multiplication symbol here. So we only have a number that has decimal or numbers behind the decimal in the bottom part of it, we have 2 of those. We've multiplied it. I've taken care of the middle part of the division part or the multiplication part of it just to kind of simplify things up. We count now 1, 2 over, and that gives us our decimal in our answer of 22.62. If we look at a different problem, we come up with 7.2 times 3.8. Again, we line up our last digits. We don't care about our decimals. We go ahead and multiply. So you're going to have that middle part here. I don't, just to, again, simplify it for the video. So I've got 1 number, 2 numbers. So I have 2 numbers behind the decimal. So I'm going to take my decimal and move it 1, 2 places over. So my actual answer is 27.36 for this problem. So we're again moving decimals to the left once we get our answer in the problem completed. So if we look at a couple more, we have, in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 numbers behind the decimal. So when I move this, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So my answer really would be 13.7107 for this one. For this one, again, we line up our last digits. So we're going to multiply through. We have 1, 2, 3 here. We have 1. So we have a total of 4. So we're going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4 places over. So we end up with 3.7122 for our final answer. So that's the multiplication part. Not too difficult. Just make sure you multiply correctly and really keep an eye on which way you're moving your decimal once you've counted up the digits. So if we move on to division. Division is a little bit more involved because there's a couple different terms that we use when dividing numbers. And some of that stuff is with your setup of your problem. And depending on how your problem is written, there's different setups. And we'll talk about that as we go. So if we're given this, we have 3 divided into 12.3. The outside number, which is the 3, is called the divisor. The inside number is called the dividend, which is the 12.3. And when you come up with the answer is called the quotient. So when you look at a problem, when it's set up, we don't necessarily write all these words down and we just identify them by that. We also sometimes in general say the inside, the outside number, and the answer. Answer is always called the quotient, excuse me, not the product, that's multiplication. So as we go through this video, I may flip-flop back and forth, but I'll try and be consistent. So when we look at the whole setup as a division problem, we have our quotient, which is our answer. And quotient always stands for division. The dividend is in the inside. The divisor is the outside number. Now, with dividing of decimals, the key point of this is this number has to be a whole number. If it isn't, we have to make it that way. And that's kind of the part that we always work on the most in dividing decimals. We know how to divide. It's just now that we throw that decimal in there that we get some issues that we'll take care of. So when you set up a division problem, you may set it up as a fraction. Well, I always read it as a sentence going down. So we have 9 divided by 3. So I've kind of give you some numbers there to correlate with. First number, second is the division symbol, and then third number is our divisor. So our dividend, divisor, and our quotient would be our answer. If it's written long way, which is kind of what you've seen in the elementary, so you have 9 divided by 3, just read it left to right like you would a sentence. 9 goes inside, 2 is the division symbol, and 3 is on the outside. So it gives you an idea of how you have to set up a problem as you go through it. So the first number goes inside, second number goes outside. First number, second number, second number. And the division sign is what we'll use as we go through this. So when we look at a problem, and we take a look at, okay, now we have an actual division problem of 65.6 divided by 8. We're going to set it up as a division problem. So again, first number goes inside, second number goes outside, dividend, divisor, quotient. So divisor is a whole number. So if it's already a whole number, we just take our decimal and move it up. Then we can kind of forget about the decimal because it's already in our answer. And then we're just going to simply divide. So as we divide, remember when you look at this, we don't necessarily have to put a 0 or an X. I've seen that done before. When we're done, we need to bring down our next digit in the process of division, and then we finish it up. Now, if this wouldn't have gone in evenly, we would have added a 0 up here and then continued until we either went out to a certain space or it actually came out to a 0. So we're not looking so much for a remainder, we're looking for what is the decimal answer for that problem. So if we look at a different one, but now I've set it up as, okay, we have 53.1 divided by 5.9. Well, now our divisor is not a whole number, so we have to make it that way. So we have to move it over here, and we're moving it over one place, which means we have to move it over one place inside, because we have to keep everything balanced in here as we go. So if a divisor is not a whole number, you need to move it to the right to make it that, and you need to do the same inside. So once you do that, just simply rewrite the problem, because then you don't have the arrows in here and it's not such a big issue, and then just simply divide it. Figure out what 59 times something will give you the 531. In this case, it's 9. So our 9 is a whole number. Again, our decimal would be here. If we had it, we would just move it up if there was some more numbers in behind. So again, the divisor has to be a whole number before you can actually divide it. So again, looking at 16.32 divided by 3.2, we have here again, we're moving it once, we're moving it once. So we're dividing. So as we go through, we know that, oh, this goes in as close to 163 as possible. It's 160. 32 is our remainder, but we bring our 2 down. 32 goes into 32 once. So again, once we've moved our decimal, we can just move that thing up in there, and we don't have to worry about it because you've already got it in the quotient. So a couple more. So we have one here that's 0.16, and we're dividing it into 64. So now we know that this is not a whole number, so we have to make it that way. So we have to move it 2 places over. So depending on how many places you move it, that also dictates what you do in here. So again, we have to move it 2 places to the right. But this doesn't have a decimal showing, so anytime that you have a whole number, remember, it's always to the right of the decimal. If you ever forget, underneath my clock is going to be a 1 with a decimal, and that decimal is always to the right, so you can look at that. So once we've done that, now we have our setup. So we have 16 divided now into 6,400. So we're going to divide 16 into 64. We know that goes in 4, and I just finished the problem out here for you, so you know that we have our zeros. So again, when we moved our decimal, this was the new place for the decimal, which came out here. We would move it up, and anytime that you have a whole number, so remember this, a whole number never shows a decimal, okay? But in a whole number of, let's say, 45, the decimal is always located at the end. So the decimal is always at the end of the number. That's where it's at, even though it's not shown. So to finish up, some of the keys that we want to talk about with the multiplication of doing this part of the process is, the first thing is line up your last digits. Biggest step in the process. Second, multiply. Forget the decimals at that point. 3, count the numbers behind the decimals in the top and bottom numbers. Step 4, move that decimal left in the answer the amount that you counted for the top and bottom numbers. So you'd have it correctly placed in that answer. So that's for multiplication. And last is for division. When we divide things out, the keys are set up the division problem correctly. I used A and B. So A is the top number, B is the bottom number. So our divisor, which is B, is a whole number. Move the decimal up, then divide. The decimal will already be in your answer. If the divisor is not a whole number, you need to make it so that you want to make sure that you move the decimal to the right, but you're also going to do the same in the answer or inside the quotient product. So do the same amount to the right, inside also, move the decimal up, and then just simply divide because the decimal will again be in the answer. So the bottom line is, last step, as always, make sure you use your notes, ask your questions. With that, good luck with your assignments.